Forget your thermostat, forget emergency apps. I want you to think about skin. Imagine waking up in the pitch black of a medieval winter. The cold isn't just a temperature, it's a predator. It seeps through every crack, it licks your skin, and the only thing stopping it from biting your bones is another body. The only heat is the rank breath of someone else hitting the back of your neck. No apps, no 911, just you, the dark, and one question: will I live to see the morning? Don't answer yet, because tonight, we're stripping bare the most brutal survival hacks of our ancestors. This isn't romantic history. This is a lethal game where every decision is traded for warmth, for life, and you will see, cold is never just a temperature. Cold is an intelligence test. Cold is the most primal desire to live. Ready? Don't look away. The next part gets even colder. Facing winter, medieval people didn't trust luck. They planned like the enemy was at the door. Their technology? Dirt, straw, and animal shit. Yes, you heard me. Wooden frames were woven with willow, then plastered with a mix of clay, straw, and livestock manure. Doesn't sound fragrant? Exactly. It reeked. But it was the most effective insulation they had. The tiny air pockets in the dried mixture trapped air, creating a living wall. The thatch roof was feet thick, sloped to shed snow. Animal fat and moss were stuffed into every gap. But the real secret? The floor plan. At night, humans and their goats, sheep, and cattle all slept under one roof. Not romantic, it was raw reality. Disgusted by the hoof clacking and the smell? Be grateful. Because the body heat from those animals, the warmth from their very dung heap, was rising through the floorboards, keeping you from freezing to death. You're warm. Now, what do you eat? The answer is beneath your feet, the root cellar. This was the ancient refrigerator, dug deep into the earth. Cool, dark, stable. But don't imagine fresh food. Imagine turnips buried in dry sand, musty grain, smoked fish, shriveled and dry, and meat so salty it burned your throat, lying in brine-filled barrels. Every jar of salt was a day of life. Every string of sausage was a blizzard survived without starvation. Preservation was a collective obsession. Autumn turned the village into a giant slaughterhouse. Blood, salt, and smoke. They weren't cooking, they were fighting rot. And they had the pottage, the legendary stew pot that never left the fire. Every day they threw in whatever was left. Scraps of vegetables, a boiled bone, a handful of grain. Today's soup greeting yesterday's. That thick, smoky, slightly sour flavor of old food, it was the only thread holding them together. What about the cold on your skin? No Gore-Tex. No problem. They had WOL. Wool was the king of winter. It stays warm even when wet. How they dressed was brutal science. Innermost layer, linen, to soak up your sour sweat. On top, a wool tunic. Outermost, a cloak coated in beeswax or animal fat. Get it? They wore grease to block the wind. It was stiff, it was sticky, and it worked. Wrists and collars were lined with rabbit or fox fur. Not for fashion, these were biological gaskets, sealing heat in at the most critical exit points. Feet went into leather shoes, but the secret was inside. They stuffed dried straw and moss in for insulation. Simple? A dry linen layer plus a thick wool layer plus a wind-blocking layer equals the three-layer system that modern fashion still copies. But don't sit still. To sit still was to invite death. They moved. Labor didn't just make food. It pumped blood. It made heat. It was cardio with one goal: live. What about bathing? Are you kidding me? In a house with no central heating, getting naked and pouring water on your body was an act of suicide. It was a direct invitation for pneumonia. Medieval people knew this from bitter experience. Cleanliness was a summer luxury. In winter, they chose pragmatic hygiene. They rubbed themselves down with warm cloths, with oils, with herbal-infused alcohol. They kept the pits and groin dry, but full-body soaking was forbidden. You think they were dirty? Correct. Their bodies smelled of sweat, smoke, animals, and old food. But that filth, that natural layer of body oil, was part of their armor. Did you want to be clean, or did you want to be alive? They chose. That was the smell of life. When the body failed, coughing, sore throat, aching joints, they had no antibiotics. They had what hung from the rafters: yarrow, sage, thyme. They brewed thick herbal teas with honey. They inhaled steam from boiling pots of leaves, a torture therapy of scalding, acrid air under a thick blanket. Sore throat? Garlic and onion soup. It filled you up, it sterilized, and it made you smell like a warrior. Stuffed nose? Steam. Aching joints? A poultice of herbs mixed with hot animal fat slapped directly onto the skin. You call it folk remedies. They called it the last chance, and they prayed. Not because they were weak, but because the mind needs an anchor. Faith was firewood for the brain, helping them get up the next day to boil water one more time. The night was an endless void. The candle was a lonely spark. No electricity, no screens, no Netflix. Just the sound of wind ripping at the thatch, the crack of freezing wood, and the sound of your own stomach. Without company, the cold gets inside your head before it gets in your bones. They knew this. What did they do? They told stories. They sang. They drank thick, heavy ale that was more like liquid bread. They huddled. Christmas wasn't just religion. It was an excuse to burn the biggest candle, eat the last piece of fatty meat, and tell each other, we've survived another part of hell. Community didn't make the winter warmer. It made you less alone in the cold. And that human touch, skin to skin, was the most primitive and effective psychological balm. Their architecture was naked thermal science. Thick stone or earth walls, tiny windows, pasted over with scraped animal hide or parchment to block wind but let in a dull gray light. The entryway had a breezeway, an airlock, to stop the first blast of wind from hitting the heart of the house. The ground floor? For livestock. The upper floor? For people. The heat and the stench from the stable rose directly, heating the floor. But the real genius was the bed. It was placed far from the door, near the hearth, and most importantly, it was curtained. Thick, heavy drapes were drawn, turning the bed into a tiny heat tent, a microclimate. This was the hub of life. This is where they slept. This is where they had sex to continue the species. This is where they gave birth. And this is where they died. All in that one warm box. To live alone was to die. The village was a survival machine. Houses were built wall to wall, reducing wind exposure, sharing collective heat. Hedges and tree lines blocked the north wind. The stone church was the ultimate storm shelter. When the blizzard hit, there were no spectators. If your neighbor's roof leaked, you fixed it. Not because you were nice, because if his house fell, your shared wall was now exposed to the wind. If one family ran out of firewood, the village shared. One fallen house dragged the whole village down. This survival map had no leisure squares. Kids stuffed straw in door cracks. Men split wood until their hands bled. Women guarded the pottage. This was risk management at its most brutal. The rhythm of winter was the rhythm of fire. Fire needed dry wood. Wood needed drying in autumn. Autumn needed chopping in summer. It was an unbroken circle. Waking up, if the embers in the hearth were still red, the day was good. If the fire was dead, it was hell. Have you ever tried to strike a spark with numb, trembling fingers? That's when you learn to value every dry piece of tinder. They saved the ash. Ash scoured pots. Ash was sprinkled on the icy ground for grip. Every movement around the fire was about one thing: maximize heat, minimize waste. Stones were heated and put in beds. The stew was kept near the fire, not on it, to stay warm without burning precious fuel. Fire was a fickle god, and they were its most devout followers. The winter menu didn't please the palate. It served endurance. Dense black bread, hard as a brick, thick oatmeal, stewed dried beans, and fat. Fat was liquid gold. A spoonful of lard added to the pottage was another hour of warmth in the storm. There were no empty calories. Everything served the goal. Burn slow, stay warm. They didn't eat for flavor. They ate to have fire in their guts. They ate salted pork fat, oily smoked fish, and drank thick, gelatinous bone broth. On feast days, maybe some honey, a few dried apples. Those small treats had a huge effect. psychological recovery. If your soup bowl was getting watery, winter was winning. If it was still thick with fat, you were still in the fight. This story doesn't glorify hardship. It glorifies brutal intelligence. Medieval people had no tech, but they had principles. No thermostat, but they knew to sleep above manure. No doctors, but they had a cabinet of herbs and animal fat. No social media, but they had a hearth and human touch. Do you feel a little smarter? If you do, keep this fire burning. Smash that subscribe button for Flow of History and ring the bell. Share this video with someone who needs a warm coat made of ideas. Comment with which filthy hack you'd use first. History invites you to bring the best tools of the past into your tomorrow. See you at the next fire.